Okay, so we're going to build on the last lab, the IP addressing lab, pinging across this basic serial interface 192.168.1.1 to 1.2. So I'm going to presume you already know how to set up IP addresses and a DCE interface on one end and add a clock rate and then ping across a serial line. So what we're going to do is add a bit of complexity now, or some slight bit more, so we can do our network address translation, a static translation lab. So what we're going to do, normally you'd have a PC on this end of your router. You could actually add a PC if you've got physical equipment, but I'm going to presume you've only got access to two routers. So what I'm going to do is add a loopback interface, which is a logical interface that doesn't really exist, it's just there for testing. Add the IP address 172.16.1.1. Then what I'm going to tell a router to do is when this IP address here, which as I said would normally be a host, tries to get out across through the router, I want it to change to IP address 10.1.1.1. Now normally this would be a routable address, a private address, so for example 200.1.1.1, but it's a bit too dangerous to add routable addresses to our labs just in case. So the first thing I want to do is add a loopback address with this IP address, and then we'll go into our NAT configuration. So I'm going to go on to router A. So show IP interface brief, and we can see we've got our serial interface. So interface loopback 0, IP address 172.16.1.1, and I'm just going to give it the default 16-bit mask. Now the other thing we need to add for network address translation is tell a router what is our inside network for the purposes of NAT and what our outside network is for the purposes of NAT. So IP NAT, and if I type question mark it will say do you want this to be the inside or outside. So I'll say inside, only because normally you could call it outside and then the serial inside, but it's not traditional to do that. So we need to designate our outside address. So interface serial, and it's 0/3/0 on this router. IP NAT out. I could just type out or outside. Now we've got a line of config we need to add, just one line for static network address translation, and all we're doing is swapping one address for one address. So we're going to say IP NAT and then inside or outside. In fact, I'll do a question mark to show you. Inside or outside, we're not worrying about a NAT pool at the moment. IP NAT inside, and then if I type question mark, what's our source? IP NAT inside source, and then our IP address. So our command is IP NAT inside source, and then type question mark. It's going to be static. We're doing a static translation. So source static question mark. Now we can add TCP UDP, but what we're going to do is just add an inside IP address. So 172.16.1.1 is our inside address. If I type space question mark, a global IP address. What this is the IP address we're going to swap this one for. So it was 10.1.1.1. So let's just look over this again. IP NAT inside source static. The 172.16.1.1 address will swap to the 10.1.1.1. If I press enter now, so that's it. That's our static NAT translation. Now if I ping, I've got to do an extended ping, and I've got to source the ping from our loopback. Now this is a little bit convoluted, but I do this to make it easy for you, because normally you'd have to plug a PC into a switch and then the switch to the router, and it just makes the lab more complicated than it needs to be. Now if I type a ping, if I go back to the network, if I do a ping from this loopback, which we'll do in a moment, it goes across the router to router B. It's going to be coming from the IP address 10.1.1.1. The problem is router B has no idea what that network is, so the ping will fail. So the easiest thing to do is tell router B to send any traffic to any network back out to the serial interface. So it's a static route. This lab won't work without this. So config T IP route, and all you do is 0.0.0.0 space and do the same thing again. So any traffic for any network, and we're going to send you out the serial 0/3/0. Exit. Alright, let's go back onto router A. I'm going to type debug IP NAT, press enter. So NAT debugging is on. I'm going to type ping and then press enter. So this is an extended ping. Target IP address is router B 192.168.1.2. Repeat count 5 is fine. Extended commands, we want to type Wi-Fi yes. Now here you should be able to type loopback 0 or the source IP address. I'm going to type loopback 0. That should work. Sometimes I have had problems. There you go. It doesn't like that. So let's do the source address of 172.16.1.1. Now that should work, and I don't know why it doesn't. It's just one of those things. Don't let it put you off. And there we go. This is really good now. This is exactly what we're looking for. NAT source is 172.16.1.1. NAT into 10.1.1.1, and the destination is 192.168.1.2. These numbers here, the router basically assigns numbers to the packets going out. So it came out packet number 7, it came back packet numbered 7, and the destination was the NATed address, which was then translated, and the source was the serial on router B. And there we go. So our NAT worked fine, and show IP NAT trans, which is short for translations, and we can see our NAT has taken place. ICMP is what ping runs off. Our inside address, inside local, inside global, inside local, which is explained in the presentations. And then the router automatically expires NAT translations out of the tables. So sometimes people will leave the keyboard for a moment or not type this command, and then they do the show IP NAT translations, and often nothing will appear, and they're a bit confused. They think NAT isn't working. So we've done a static NAT. So NAT, this will be here all the time, this actual inside and outside here, but you won't see the table like this because it'll have expired. You may get different outputs depending on which version of code you've got, and you can see already that there's a problem which I've seen happen a lot, where you type the loopback interface number and it doesn't seem to like it. The other thing is, if you ever have problems with the NAT lab, I'll do a show run. The things that are nearly always missing are your IP NAT inside on your inside network, your IP NAT outside on your outside network, and possibly some sort of problem with the NAT configuration for static NAT. The other thing that could go wrong is you don't have a return static address on router B. So just remember IP NAT inside, IP NAT outside, your NAT configuration for static NAT or dynamic or PAT, and also the network, the router you're pinging must know how to get back to this NATed address. It doesn't care about the source address because this has been NATed. Okay, so follow the lab along and have fun with it.